My name is Joe Mankowski. I work in the Department of Fitness and Recreation. I'm the assistant director over there. So that means I kind of do a little bit of everything that, I help out a little bit with everything that we do over there. Student employees are super important to us. We are a department that in total is about 150 people, and only 2 of those people are full-time staff. So everybody else is a student in some capacity, whether it's a grad student or an undergrad student. And because of that, we have to be really intentional about the development that goes on in our department and how we are bringing those students up to the level that we expect. Yeah, so we look for students the same way a lot of other people do in terms of going through jobs.belmont.edu, but we do spend a little bit of time making sure that we're pretty clear on the competencies and the characteristics that we're looking for in our students. We found that when we spend some time specifying those things, it provides a lot of clarity for us in the interview process because we know the questions we want to ask, we know the things that we're looking for, and we know how we want to evaluate those applicants. But it also helps us down the road a little bit when it comes to evaluation because again, if we know what we're looking for and we know what the behaviors associated with that competency are, we can really be specific in the behaviors we're looking to develop in those students, but also identifying who's doing well and who's really succeeding at exhibiting those behaviors. The competencies play out a little bit individually, right? Everybody's going to express things their own way. So we might have something, one of the things we look for is people who ensure accountability, because we know that whether it is with their peers or with people who are coming in to use the facility, we have to hold each other accountable. We are a space where we need people to be safe. We need people to play by the rules. Otherwise somebody could get hurt or worse. And so that's something that we expect from all of our staff. But at the end of the day, you might express that differently than I do. You know, I'm a louder personality, I'm a little bit bigger, and so me ensuring accountability might look a little bit differently than how you might do it. And so we are aware of that, and we kind of expect that a little bit. Like we give them the latitude to express those competencies in their own way. Our department's really big on that kind of cross-department collaboration. We recognize that we have been given resources to train and develop these students, but at the end of the day, they're Belmont's resources. They're not FitRec specific. And so with respect to that, we're always looking at ways to collaborate and communicate, whether that's getting information from people, so communicating with our colleagues over in counseling services or our colleagues in student care to make sure that we're helping those students who come into our facility should we need to. But also programs like BOLD, the Belmont Office of Leadership Development, working with BOLD to be really, really intentional in the learning outcomes that we write for our trainings, for our staff meetings, for our, we call them CEUs. They're basically in-service trainings where we get to dive deeper into some of that development for our students. In working with them and understanding the framework and figuring out ways to incorporate that into what we're doing, we're just, again, supporting the mission of the university of transforming and engaging these students to go out and be great. So our CEUs, those continuing education units, we look at them very similar to how you might look at them for a certification you have. So for me, it makes sense from a fitness certification standpoint. When you get a certification, you have to do some stuff to keep it moving and to keep it current. So that could look different depending on what position a student has. If they are a personal trainer, we might have a CEU that is focused on how to interact with their client base a little bit better, or how to build that connection and build rapport with the client who's new to personal training. For a facility assistant, one of the people who works at our front desk or on our weight room floor, it's going to be similar in that it's based on our guiding principles of community service and stewardship, but it's going to manifest itself a little bit differently. So while that personal trainer is looking at building community from building rapport with clients, our facility assistant is going to be looking at building community by helping to break the ice with someone who's walking in the building. So it's still rapport building, but again, it's specific to the position. Another one, again, talking about our guiding principles, community service and stewardship. Stewardship's the one that gives us the most latitude to kind of work with. And so for our outdoor rec, for example, our climbing assistants, people who work at our climbing wall, they're going to go through a CEU learning how to set routes on the wall, or learning how to create challenging problems and routes so that part of our department can continue to be engaging week after week. So when we think about performance evaluation or evaluating the performance of our staff, we really have to take a step back and recognize that that starts in day one of training. It starts with us making sure that they understand what our expectations are for the position and that they understand that we will be evaluating them formally at the end of each semester to kind of chart our progress. And we don't go into it thinking it's going to be punitive. We don't, market it saying we're trying to catch where you're messing up. We market it as saying this is our way to recognize when you're doing well and kind of plan for what the next steps look like. So when we're starting in training and preparing them for that stuff, we have to be competency-based. We have to make sure they understand that we're looking for things like ensuring accountability, collaborating across company or department lines, building that inclusive environment. All of these things are things that we make sure they understand. And then we take some time to say, how can we do this? And we let them tell us that because they're going to know it better than we will. I mean, I can sit in my office all day and write down different examples of how I think someone can build inclusivity. And kind of break down those walls, those barriers between diverse populations. But at the end of the day, the person who's working on the floor is the person who's going to be best equipped to know how to practically practice that competency. So we keep that in mind, we bring that up, we make sure that they understand that all of this relates back to who we are, again, with our mission and our guiding principles. And then about halfway through the semester, we do what we call a check-in. And it's just whoever's been supervising them throughout the semester takes a staff member aside and says, hey, how do you think things are going? These are the things we're going to be evaluating you on. We're not going formal right now. It's a 10-minute thing. While you're on shift, we'll just pull you aside a little bit and say, hey, what does that look like? In your words, how are you doing? Because you know our standard. We've been clear in making sure you understand that. And with that standard in mind, where can we get better? Where do you want to head in the second half of the semester? Because we recognize if we only talk to them at the end of the semester, we just wasted 15 weeks where we could be intentionally developing that student. So then, after the halfway point, we get to the end of the semester, and we will do a formal sit-down evaluation where we have at least 2 members of our student leadership team, so whether that's a graduate assistant or one of our student coordinators. They'll sit down with this individual, and it works easiest to understand with our facility assistants. So they'll sit down with a facility assistant, and they will come into it with an evaluation filled out for them based on those competencies. And that really briefly, it's a much more complicated process than this, but really briefly that is saying that if ensures accountability, if the behavior for a 4 out of 4, the highest one is, for lack of a better way to say it, holds others accountable, and a 1 out of 4 is doesn't hold others accountable, where do they rank based on that behavior? And tying it to specific examples, not just like, well, I feel like they're a 4 or they deserve a 4, but literally with behaviorally anchored rating scales, where do they fall? In addition to all that stuff, the student will bring their own evaluation, so they get a chance to say, based on this scale, I think I am, this score. But we'll also have feedback that we get throughout the year from supervisors saying, hey, this student did a great job, or this student struggled today on this thing, had to remind them to get back on track, or whatever it was, so that they're not surprised and so that they can kind of see their progression throughout the semester. It's a great opportunity for us to just level set, to say, hey, here's how we see you performing, here's how you see you performing. If they're if we both agree, awesome. If we don't, well, why don't we agree on this? And what are we not seeing that you are, or vice versa? And then after that, again, the last part of that conversation is where are we going from here? How do we develop further? If we notice that you've got some pretty high marks consistently, maybe we'll talk about some opportunities for leadership within the department. How can we promote? If we don't have a formal promotion, how can we still give you that advanced opportunity? How can we move you ahead to prepare you when an opportunity does present itself? If we notice there's maybe some lower scores, we talk about, is this the best place for you to utilize your talents and your resources the best that you can? And if it is, then how are we going to do that? And if it's not, then how can we help you find that place?